Imagine a new kind of investing, a potentially life-changing way to invest that honors biblical principles, the kind of principles that you and I grew up with. Since 1994, Timothy Plan has made biblically responsible investing possible, offering mutual funds and ETFs that are filtered for biblical principles. Don't compromise your values. Invest with Timothy Plan. Ask your financial advisor or call Timothy Plan at 1-800-TIM-PLAN. Again, that's 1-800-846-7526 and discover what it means to be a biblically responsible investor. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing. Mutual funds distributed by Timothy Partners Ltd. and ETFs distributed by Foreside Fund Services LLC. As a paid testimonial, there is no guarantee of future performance and each experience will differ. Hey there, welcome to the MemoPOD. This is your host Peter Head. Glad to have you with us, and I feel like I'm on a time crunch now. I feel like I have to rush through this. I feel like I've got to cram everything that I need to say in the first 10 minutes of this MemoPOD, and I'll tell you why. I will tell you, without mentioning names, one of my longtime friends, a lady in our church that's kind of one of those pillars of the church. Like, she's been a backbone of the congregation. I've known her since I would have been, like in 7th grade? That would have been, how old are you in 7th grade? Well, my daughter's 7th grade. She's 13. So I have known her 32 years. 32 years. I've known who she was for 32 years. I've really known her for my adult life, but I'm just a pillar. And she is a beloved paid subscriber to this Substack, the MemoPOD, all of it. One of those people that you just look up to and you listen to their thoughts and opinions and wisdom. She comes up to me on Sunday, and amongst other things that we discuss, it comes out in the course of the conversation that she usually only makes it the first 10 to 15, maybe 20 minutes of the MemoPOD before this happens, and she actually demonstrated it. You ready for this? This is what it was. It was... Okay, I laughed about that the rest of the day. It's just, that's the kind of person that you know we're friends. Because they're totally comfortable telling you that. Now, by the way, she did say, and then I go back and I find where it was and I read the transcript. So it's great. If you're a paid subscriber, you get the transcript of all this. That's totally worth the price of admission. So I feel like I need to do a song and dance. I feel like I need to do like the Send in the Clowns thing. I am going to adjust there we go. But anyway, so I feel like I got to cram all of this in really quickly. Let me start off. We're going to be bouncing around all over the place. It's going to be crazy time. Let me start off by saying it's evening time. It's nighttime now that I'm recording this. And I just came out. My wife and I just got done watching Am I Racist? We went and saw the Matt Walsh movie, which I had teased in one of the MemoPODs a few weeks ago. Went and saw this movie, and it exceeded my expectations. I'll put it that way. Just from a mere technical standpoint, one of the things that stood out at us when we're watching the credits, because you have to stay to the end after the credits, like every movie does now, but we're watching the credits, and there's so few people involved. And there's a lot of people involved. Don't get me wrong. The credits go on for a while. But compare it to a Hollywood production. But this was every bit the quality entertainment. I saw somebody, and I don't remember who it was, but somebody who's in the entertainment world say that that's what the Daily Wire is now doing. They are putting out entertainment products that can compete just on a technical side. With the major Hollywood productions. It's not one of those things that, well, as a conservative or as a Christian, I feel like I got to go and support this movie, and you got to sit through a terrible product, but then you feel good about where your money's going. It's not one of those deals. So from a technical aspect, just incredibly well done. Secondly, was the content. I knew because I've been involved in the political stuff for a lot of my life. I knew what grift was. Grift, where you're making money off of feeding on people's emotions, and you're in some cases gaslighting people, and then making money off of it. I get it. I know it exists, but the level to which it exists, and I don't want to give any spoilers, and I don't think this really is, but when you have people who will charge you $5,000 to come to their home, have dinner with you, and call you a racist all evening, that is some kind of incredible grift that you've got going. $5,000. Do you know how hard? Well, of course you do. How hard you and I have to work to make $5,000. These people have set up a system whereby they'll get individuals to pay them $5,000 so that they will come, they'll feed them, not the person that's making the $5,000. The person that's paying the $5,000 will feed the people they're paying $5,000 to, in order for them to get a couple hours where the person they're paying sits there and calls them a racist. I wouldn't have believed it if I didn't see it. And that's what this kind of blows the lid off of. I don't know, and I know that Robin DiAngelo, the one that wrote White Fragility, that, a lot of former students and like, I know a lot of people who have read this book and have just been, oh yeah, this is really good. No, it's not. It's setting up the grift is what it is. And it's harming race relations in the country. I have never been so convinced and convicted, and this is what that film will do. It will help you see these are the people that are causing the problem. They are the ones. Thomas Sowell has a great quote, the economist, Thomas Sowell, and Walsh puts it in the movie towards the end, essentially saying that racism is dying out. It is simply being kept alive by politicians and activists, and in this case, grifters, who are making money off of it. And when the rest of us just say, no, I'm not doing this anymore. This is stupid, and I'm not going to play the game, and you're not going to make me feel bad. I'm just not doing this. When we say that, the whole thing ends. And I think it was Christopher Rufo that made the comment online saying that how DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, which is the whole grift that's been set up by this, how it survives this film with the millions of people that are seeing it and talking about it in the clips that are being circulated. I don't know. I don't know how Robin DiAngelo can go and show her face. There's a reason that she's basically taken down all of her social media feeds. And a lot of the people that are featured in the film have taken them all down. In the second half of the podcast today, I want to address something. And this was my plan before I saw the movie. And I still want to address it. Because a guy that I greatly respect, from a theological standpoint, from his Christian wisdom in the culture and things like that, he's a very, very bright guy. He enjoyed the film, but his problem was Walsh deceived a lot of people, tricked them into being in this movie. And deception isn't biblical. It's not something that we should do. I want to share with you what Andrew Walker, that's the guy's name, what Andrew Walker's take was. And I felt like he's right about this. And I do think that there's still part theologically that he is right. But I want to make a statement now after having seen the film and kind of dive into this idea of when deception is bad. And when, because remember, Rahab deceived the spy, the people. Yeah, good, Peter. I preach, can you tell? When she was hiding the spies in Jericho, she was hiding the Hebrew spies, the Israelites, from the people of Jericho. She deceived people. But of course, that deception was righteous. So there are times that I think we have to be careful about just a blanket statement. Well, in no way can you ever cloak who you are. You can't ever hide who you are or misrepresent who you are. I think that that's an easy statement to make, but when you start peeling back the pages of Scripture, that's not entirely the case. That sounds like a radical statement. I want to get into it and kind of explain where I'm coming from in the second half. Now, this half, I do have to talk about J.D. Vance for a second, because Dana Bash of CNN, Dana Bash, first of all, got destroyed by J.D. Vance in an interview. I know a lot of people weren't thrilled with the pick of J.D. Vance, thought that Donald Trump could have done better. Here's what I think. I think Donald Trump could have done smarter for getting elected. I think there were people that fit, fit the look of what they were looking at. You pick a woman, whether it's Nikki Haley or it's Tulsi Gabbard. I think that you could have picked a black man like Tim Scott, and you could have checked off the identitarian politics thing that would have helped, electorally speaking, politically speaking. But as far as finding somebody who's going to handle the press, who is extremely intelligent and extremely well-spoken, I don't know that Donald Trump could have found a better running mate. To me, it's a complete contrast from the top of the ticket. I think that Donald Trump doesn't really have any idea what he's talking about when he opens his mouth, much like the top of the other side of the ticket with Kamala Harris. But J.D. Vance, man, he knows his stuff. And so he goes on with Dana Bash. I want to play this clip for you so that you can see what I'm talking about, because his way of handling the hostile press, well, I want you to watch it, and then I'll tell you what I think about it. This was Dana Bash's attempt to hold J.D. Vance accountable for his completely unacceptable and provocative rhetoric that was leading to bomb threats and all sorts of things against Haitian immigrants and migrants and refugees and all that stuff. Take a look at this.
And to protect them. Kamala Harris opened the border, and now these people are suffering. That's what I'm focused on, Dana.
Senator, I have to go through several things that you just said. First of all, the Clark County Sheriff and the Ohio Department of Natural Resources reviewed 11 months of 911 calls. They only identified 2 instances of people alleging Haitians were taking geese out of parks. They found 0 evidence to substantiate those claims. Also, other evidence that you have talked about, even you've retweeted alleged evidence, are unsourced social media videos from a different city, apparently no connection to Haitians. And this is from a conservative activist who offered a $5,000 reward for such things. And then going just backly to the schools and the hospitals and so forth being overwhelmed, nobody is disputing that the town of Springfield, Ohio, needs help. But you're not just a bystander, you're the senator from Ohio. So instead of saying things that are wrong and actually causing the hospitals, the schools, the government buildings to be evacuated because of bomb threats, because of the cats and dogs thing, why not actually be constructive in helping to better integrate them into the community? Because there are a lot of employers there who say that the Haitian workers are helping fill jobs that they need desperately filled.
Dana, first of all, let me just respond to a couple things that you said, but I want to start with something you said, which I think is frankly disgusting and is more appropriate for a Democratic propagandist than it is for an American journalist. There is nothing that I have said that has led to threats against these hospitals. These hospitals, the bomb threats and so forth, it's disgusting. The violence is disgusting. We condemn it. We condemn all violence.
Senator, this happened after you and President Trump were on the debate stage, said that cats and dogs were being eaten.
You asked a question, Dana, and I'm going to go ahead and answer it.
What
we have said is that this town has suffered terribly under the policies of Kamala Harris. Now, you just accused me of inciting violence against the community when all that I've done is surface the complaints of my constituents, people who are suffering because of Kamala Harris's policies. Are we not allowed to talk about these problems because some psychopaths are threatening violence? We can condemn the violence on the one hand, but also talk about the terrible consequences of Kamala Harris's open border on the other hand. Now, let me just fact check a couple of other things that you said, Dana, because it's important. You said that all of these migrants are in the country legally. They are in the country through what's called temporary protective status.
Right.
That is when Kamala Harris waved a magic amnesty wand, taking people and giving them legal status. That is not to say that they're here legally. That is a terrible indictment of her amnesty policies that have further opened the border and further
but it's
caused
not illegal.
terrible migration into this country.
You might not agree with the policy, and obviously you don't, which is totally fair and legitimate. There are policy disagreements all the time. But the fact is it is the law because President Biden and Vice President Harris are. But I don't want to frankly go down this conversation about policy
Dana,
because
you made a point. You don't. I agree. You don't want to talk about policy.
No,
Dana,
what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about
instead of about the fact,
Senator,
that
it was
Harris,
your distraction.
Dana, granted amnesty.
You were the one who started
level.
talking about eating dogs and cats.
Level.
You were the one who
Dana,
brought this
my
up.
Constituents
The president
were the
said
ones
it to
who talked
60
about eating
million
dog and
people.
cats, and I talked about it because you were ignoring this community. My constituents talked about it.
Have you been
it is
to
my
Springfield?
Responsibility to surface their concerns when the American media
Have you been to
ignores it.
Springfield?
Dana, I've been to Springfield probably 100 times in my life.
How about
I've taken
recently,
my children
since
to
you've
get
heard
ice
this?
cream at Young's Jersey Dairy.
Have you heard recently since you've gotten these calls?
Have I been in the last 4 days?
No,
I'm
talking
haven't been
about
in the last 4 days, but I've
since
talked
you've
to a lot
gotten
of
these
people
calls
in
from the
Springfield, Dana,
constituents.
and they're telling me this stuff is happening. Dana, would you like to ask me questions and then let me answer them, or would you like to debate me on these topics? I noticed that when you had Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, you gave them multiple choice answers to the questions that you asked, and you allowed them to answer the questions. I'm happy to be here to talk about policy, but if you're going to interrupt me every single time that I open my mouth, then why am I even doing this? So please ask a question, and I'd ask you to be polite enough to let me answer it.
Yes, I am, and I think that.
Okay, point number one, before I go on and I get too carried away. Point number one is Mike DeWine, the governor of Ohio, has come out and said every single one of those bomb threats, they weren't real. They were faked. They were not legitimate threats. They were coming from overseas and places like that. None of them were serious threats, which means that Dana Bash's entire narrative upon which she based that attack on J.D. Vance was in fact false. That once again, CNN did not do journalism. They didn't actually find out if what they were saying. They were doing exactly what Vance accused them of doing, which was propagandizing. They are taking Democrat talking points and throwing them out as fact and then making J.D. Vance respond to it. And that's the kind of stuff that has always historically tripped up Republican nominees and office seekers. Even Mike Pence, who I have a great deal of respect for as the vice presidential candidate, Mike Pence tried not to have a hostile, antagonistic relationship with the press. I don't even know how to put into words Mike Pence's demeanor. It's just Mike Pence. And I don't have a problem with it. I'm just saying he had his own specific demeanor, but it was never one that would go back at the press. Now, you contrast that with Donald Trump, who has a very antagonistic approach to the press, and people crack up about it, but Donald Trump's approach isn't to point out where they're lying. It's not to do what you just saw with J.D. Vance, which is to go point by point and call them out for, you're spreading propaganda that isn't based, you're accusing me of inciting violence. How dare you do that? That isn't at all what happened. I'm voicing the concerns of my constituents because you weren't. You were ignoring the plight of these people. And only when I started talking about it did you have to start covering it. But notice how Vance says it in a very direct, a very rational, a very articulate manner that is also, in its own way, polite. He's being direct and he's being blunt, but it's also done in a polite manner. And it immediately put Dana Bash on the defensive, which revealed what? And this is so significant. This is so important. What you saw with Dana Bash there is not journalism. It's not what media is supposed to do. It's not what a news anchor or an unbiased television host would do. It would be one thing if Dana Bash was hosting and throwing out the topic and then having a Democrat on one side and J.D. Vance on the other, and she's moderating the discussion. No, Dana Bash was playing the part of the Democrat. She was, and Vance used the word, you are debating me. You aren't interviewing me. And then he contrasted it with what she did with Tim Walz and Kamala Harris. This is not at all what you did with them, where you lofted them softballs and then you sat there and let them talk. You are debating me on this topic. Why do you think that's your role? Who made that your role? To defend the Democrat position, to go on attack for the Democrats. That's not your job. You are supposed to be a journalist. And I think that J.D. Vance does that better than anybody. And in that sense, he's kind of proving himself to be the right pick. And I'm not going to insult Trump, but I'm going to say if Donald Trump is in that seat and all those questions come at him like that, he will insult Dana Bash, he will call them fake news, and then he will make some exaggerated statement that isn't anywhere close to reality, which then CNN will fact check and the others will fact check and tell everybody that Donald Trump's lying. And there's nothing productive there. J.D. Vance is capable of doing something there. He's got a grasp on things that Donald Trump simply doesn't have. And in that sense, he is a great balance to this ticket. I wish it wasn't that way. I sit there and think, what if there was a competent individual, an articulate individual at the top of the ticket, and as the vice presidential pick? It'd be amazing. And I don't think we would even be talking about a close race at this point in time. But it's really unproductive, I guess, to sit there and say what might have been. But hats off to J.D. Vance for doing that. I just, the way that she fell off of her game was, yo. And I wish I should do this, but I was busy watching that movie tonight instead of doing this. But I wish I could set up a side-by-side of the way Dana Bash was interrupting J.D. Vance and going on offense and being aggressive and throwing out Democrat propaganda versus the way that she talked to Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Just, it's kid gloves versus Mike Tyson. That's what it is. And the fact that anybody could claim that they don't see that is insane. But I really did appreciate it. Not rude, not name calling, but holding them to account. I just, that's exactly what needs to be done. One other thing that I wanted to get to here in the first half before I take the break and then come back and talk a little bit about that movie and the deception angle. I think we have to now acknowledge this last weekend, the second would-be assassin. I think it's well past time to acknowledge that the country has an issue with left-wing violence. I don't mean potential violence. I know what we have in the culture. We have a lot of hand-wringing by the media, by people like Dana Bash and the folks, Joe Scarborough and all of the others, about Christian nationalism and the threat it represents, and about all this pearl-clutching about the threat of authoritarianism from right-wing fascists, and we've got all the media hysterics about the white neo-Nazis on the march. Okay, this is all, look at the potential of what these people might do. Look at what the right might be bringing to us. There's a real threat, the growing specter of right-wing violence, and there's no examples of it actually happening. There's a lot of talk about the fear of it, but you can't say, okay, there's an example, and there's an example, and there's an example, and yet Antifa violence was real, and it was left-wing. They've killed people, and they've destroyed property. It's real, and it's left-wing motivated. Black Lives Matter. That violence was real. It killed people, and it was left-wing motivated. It destroyed a ton of property. The recent spate of school shootings. those have been transgender shooters who are fired by left-wing radicalism. It's real, it's happened, and it's left-wing. And now the second attempted assassination of Donald Trump in, 60 days? It was real and clearly has the markings of left-wing lunacy. So, and I guess you have to say this stuff. I shouldn't have to say this, but I will. The vast majority of people with progressive politics, they wouldn't participate in anything like that, and they wouldn't condone anything like that. The vast majority. But too many of those that belong to the vast majority, I'm thinking even the people in the media who are part of the left-wing Democrat media complex, they wouldn't participate in that violence, and they wouldn't want that violence. But here's what they're not willing to do. They are not willing to point out what is fomenting in their corner of the culture. They won't talk about it because they don't want to be hurt politically, so they won't talk about it. I mean, you have to be a loon. That's the only word for it. To believe that the way all of this is being addressed in the media, the school shootings, the transgender shooters, the Antifa violence, the Black Lives Matter, I mean, it was a joke. It became a joke. The mostly peaceful people, the CNN reporter saying the mostly peaceful protesters as the city's on fire behind him, it became a classic meme. The way the stories are written about how Republicans seethe after a second attempt on Donald Trump's life. What, do you think that's what would be said if it was going the other direction? Say if people had made an attempt on Barack Obama's life, 2 assassination attempts. Can you imagine the way the media would be addressing it? Would you have heard a little bit more about that shooter, the first shooter, the Thomas Crooks guy? Would you have heard a little bit more about him than what you've heard over the course of the last month? Of course you would. And we all know that to be the case. I do not believe for a second that Vice President Kamala Harris is involved in any type of secretive plot to murder Donald Trump. She would be the dumbest person alive to want Donald Trump out of the picture. I think it's pretty apparent at this point, her only chance of winning this election is to rely on and feed off of anti-Trump fervor. That's the only way she's getting her base out. She's not going to motivate them. The more they hear her talk, the more they'll be reminded of what they knew about her a few months ago and what they were all saying about her. Man, Biden's got to dump her. She's a huge weight on that. Oh, she's the greatest thing I've ever seen. No. She's not going to get her base out to vote. She needs Donald Trump to do that. So in no way do I think Kamala Harris is involved in any type of nefarious inside job where they're trying to, to rub out Donald Trump. Don't think that's the case. But I also think that it's apparent that 2 assassination attempts in 2 months, it should speak volumes to us, to everybody, including Kamala Harris and everybody else involved in the left-wing media Democrat Party sphere, and it's all the same sphere, that fueling the vitriolic hatred in a bunch of deranged half-wits, which again is not the vast majority of left-wingers, but they're out there, it's proving to be a profound threat to the preservation of our democratic republic. Left-wing violence in general is proving to be a threat to that. So if you really are the people that care about democracy and Republican forms of government, as I have been assured on many occasions, we all have, okay, I believe you. So call out the folks who are threatening it. At least as much as you warn of the potential that there might be some on the right that one day, if given the opportunity, might turn into something that looks like what's actually happening from the left. I think you have to do that at this point, no? to have any credibility? I think so. I really do. Your thoughts welcome. Peter@peterheck.com, Peter@peterheck.com, or you can comment down below in the comments section if you're a paid subscriber. And speaking of paid subscribers, hang on with me through the break. I want to talk now about this Matt Walsh video. I want to share with you what Andrew Walker said about it and the concern over using deception to expose people. Is it right? Is it wrong? I think Walker's right about some stuff, but after having seen the film, I think there's also some points that need to be made about that kind of categorization, that kind of position. All right, we'll do that for paid subscribers. Those of you who are free subscribers, it's great. I'm glad you're with us. Would love to have you part of that discussion, particularly if you're believers, if you're Christians. This is the kind of stuff that we need to know. Because Matt Walsh, well, I'll get into it, but would love to have you. You can try us out. If for $10 a month, you just click the button in the email that I sent you, and you can then have access to all of these, the long pods and the memos on Monday and all of that stuff. Would love to have you part of that. So just give us a shot, or just rip it off like a Band-Aid. $100 for the whole year, and it's done like that, and you just got it for a year. And then you don't like it, you can dump us. I don't think you'll dump us. We're a lot of fun. Anyway, unless of course you're that lovely lady from my church who's been asleep for the last 10 minutes. Then we're not that much fun. Got to hit the break. Come back for paid subscribers, free subscribers. I'll see you next week.
The Memo with Peter Heck.
Please patronize and thank all the sponsors of the Heck podcast, including McGonigal's Buick GMC, Terrell's Auto Service, Norris Insurance, Stevens Machine, Creative Financial Center, Indiana Right to Life, Tri-Green Tractor, the Indiana Family Institute, Hartman Family Farms, Liberty Financial Group, the Wyman Group, and J. Watson Creations.